What up? Federalist Papers. Beautiful documents. And we got to make this quick because Mr. Dowdy just got a Chipotle quesarito, which is like a burrito, but they make it with cheese in it, so it's like a quesadilla as a round burrito. Unbelievable. First time I'm ever going to try it. Not that I'm giving a shout out for Chipotle, but Federalist Papers. Again, Federalist Papers were put into the Constitution, or not in the Constitution, but argued for the ratification of the Constitution by the people who wrote the document. So they're kind of like opinion pieces, like little commentary, like you'll see in a editorial in a newspaper, that are advocating for the passing of this new document, this new setup of government. There were many of them, and we're going to focus on Federalist 10, 39, 51, and 78. Now, you're wondering, why is there a 9 after 78? Well, because Mr. Dowdy already did this, and I forgot to press record. So could you imagine me sitting here for 5 minutes chit-chatting, and imagine what came out of my mouth when I found out I wasn't recording. It was unbelievable. So let's look at Federalist 10. Federalist 10 is perhaps the most commonly quoted of all of the Federalist Papers, and it was written by James Madison. And it talks about factions. What is a faction? A faction is a group of people. Could be a group coming together to support a candidate as a political party. It could be a group coming together for a specific interest or policy area. So he talks about factions and how factions could potentially be bad. They could be bad if one particular faction was able to control or gain control over a particular government. And that was a concern of his. However, he said the only way you could fix factions is worse than the problems that evolve from factions. The only way you could fix factions is if you took away people's right to speech, etc. And that was worse than the problem of having all of these factions. So what he says, and I'm going to draw a very realistic drawing of the United States. Beautiful. Looks like, I don't know what that looks like. Anyways, that's the United States for all intents and purposes. And what he says is, if we can spread out factions or groups in a large republic, then the ability of one faction taking control is very slim. So if we were a small confederation like we were, it would be much easier for a small group to take over. Think of it like people in Texas are very different than other Americans. Not in a bad way necessarily. If they were their own country, if you will, it would be very easy for them to be taken over by a very conservative movement. But now, when we're talking about the greater United States, we've spread out the factions and therefore made it almost impossible for one particular group to take power. And this essentially is a check on factions, so a check. So Federalist 10 deals with factions. I don't know how you're going to remember that in regards to the 10, but it deals with factions. Fractions. And again, spread it out in a large republic and you should be good to go. Federalist 39, and I'm going to try to spell this. I'm going to look on my sheet because the spelling always gets me and it still could be wrong. The primary focus is popular sovereignty. Sovereignty is a tough one to spell. Popular sovereignty. The idea that all political power resides with the people, and that people give up some of their rights to be governed and choose someone to govern them, which leads to a republic or representative democracy. And the idea that you have a right to choose somebody to represent you and govern over you. Another key to this particular document is the idea that if power was being abused, you have the ability to impeach. So in our document, the document that they drew up, they did have that power. So people were concerned about an elected official maybe becoming a little tyrannical. We had the impeachment ability. You also obviously have an ability to re-elect somebody else. So this also advocated for limited terms. Okay. So Madison, Federalist 39, popular sovereignty. Power ultimately resides with the people. Republic, you choose someone to represent you in a representative democracy. You have the ability to rescind that consent you give. It kind of sounds like Locke, John Locke. You have the ability to rescind that if you're unhappy with how you're being governed. Federalist 51, Madison again, deals with separation, and I always spell this wrong. Separation. I don't know if it's an A or if it's an E. Separation of powers and federalism. So Federalist 51 advocates for this federal sharing of power. The 10th Amendment dividing whatever's not left to the states, reserved powers. 51 advocates for that setup. Not only that, but it advocates for a separation of powers at the central federal level in D.C. Why? Because it makes it very difficult for one particular person to take control. And there was some concern, obviously, as we get away from a monarchy, of the elements of a monarchy being in the Constitution. Well, this is alleviated with separation of powers. And you have some checks and balances in there as well. So separation of powers and federalism. Both of these things are the main discussion Madison has in regards to this new document. These things are safeguards in regards to one person or one small group getting power. And finally, we get one from Hamilton, which deals with the judicial branch. The judiciary. Looks like a K. The judiciary. Why do I have 7, 8, 9? Well, this is how you remember this one. There are 9 justices. This is Federalist 78. What comes after 8? 9. There's 9 justices. I know it's stupid, but maybe some of you will remember that 78 is tied to the courts because of that. So you have the judiciary. '78 advocates for a lifetime appointment. Someone's at my door and they're watching me as I'm talking. A lifetime appointment for judges. So when they are going into office, they get lifetime appointments. Why? It will keep them away from direct pressures from different branches of government and from politics. That the court should be non-political. They should look at an issue and not have any pressures on them to rule one way or another. And therefore, if you have a lifetime appointment and the president or Congress can't remove you, then you're ideally not going to be making decisions based on politics, but on a proper application of the Constitution. So lifetime appointments in the judiciary, in the hopes that it is isolated from direct political pressures. Okay? So essentially, they wanted independence of this branch. Independence of the judicial branch. So that it, again, was free from direct political pressure and could make decisions without that pressure. So, there you go. You got 10, 39, 51, 78. Good luck on your test tomorrow. Hopefully you've watched this. If you've watched this, you get a bonus, because I believe in bonuses. This is not North Korea. This is America. And you get a little bonus when you do good things. So your bonus today is if you put unbelievable under question 60. Don't put it near the bubbles. Question 60. You'll get a prize tomorrow or the day after. I promise you that. Promise you. Promise you, promise you, promise you. All right? So we'll see you tonight at review session in half an hour. I'm going to eat my quesarito.